I started out particularly because I was interested, and I've always been interested, in the fact that when you are someone in power, you have to somehow convey that power. And you convey it oftentimes, if you know that, when kings or queens become coronated, that they would wear certain regalia, they carry certain standards, they have an orb or they have a crown, something that marks you out. Even presidents will take an oath. There's a ritual or a ceremony. And what I got interested in, we're really going to have problems with this, aren't we? What I got interested in started back with the Bush administration. Because what I began to notice is when I looked at images that were being used to commemorate events where he had been, whether he had been giving a speech or whether he had been taking off to go on some sort of trip. Do you need my help? Going to restart? Okay. Okay, do that. They were very carefully crafted images. There we go. There's a perfect one. And these images were crafted with such beautiful care. These people, I began to think, really, had an eye for things. Whoever was handling him, what they were understanding was, you put him in front of Rushmore, you line him up with the heads of those people from the past, and it equates him visually with these great men, these great thinkers. It puts him under Jefferson, of course, who's appropriate for someone who's the kind of godfather of republicanism. Well, that's interesting. We don't want to install 3 yet. We'll quit that. And the other thing that I began to realize is that one flag was never enough. That thousands of flags appeared in the background, and that they would become almost a pattern where they lose some sort of meaning because you see too many of them, but that they always were carefully aligning. So, for example, the red and white stripes, and then he has a blue tie. It's very carefully planned out. And I thought, and the third thing, I have, I think, 3 examples I brought to show you. And this was the one where I really thought I must be seeing things, because here he is, and this is do you remember this, when this talk? This was after 9/11. This was when he addressed the nation after 9/11. And he's standing there, and there's what? Statue of Liberty in the back. I know, I've been to New York. You can't see that thing at night. It's just a blob out there. So I thought, what happened? And sure enough, in the New York Times, there was an article the next day, and it explained that his advance crew had gone out, had hired barges. There weren't enough barges in New York. They had to bring the barges up from Virginia, and they had hired Klieg lights, and they had put them out there, and they had illuminated the Statue of Liberty, so it would be behind him when he gave this talk. Now that's brilliant. That is complete manipulation, but it was, and I thought, that's really clever. And it went on to say that the people who were setting up his images were setting him up in the right spot. For example, that shot of the Mount Rushmore. Usually when a president directs or addresses an audience, the press is in back. So they're taking head-on shots of the president. But his handlers moved all the press corps over to the side, so that they arranged it so that the only shot these people had was this profile of Bush and the Rushmore in the background. So that it was not just my imagination. These people were working very hard to get the image out there, to play with it. And these are people who understand the power of an image, the power to say a lot with a visual. So then I thought, well, at that point, what you want to begin to play with is, where are they getting these ideas? What's the history of them? I'm a historian. What I care about is how we use visual images to convey ideas, how we use visual images, especially political visual images, to justify someone being in power, to promote someone being in power, or to explain their power. So I began to look back in history, and I'm going to do a few sort of examples I've picked for you tonight to talk about how people in history have actually gone about creating an image for themselves and trying to explain their power. And then we'll go back and look at a few more. I'm going to make you do some of the work at the end, looking at some more of the images by Bush, and I thought we'd end by looking at the Obama images that are coming out now. Now, I want to stress that all the images I have pulled for both the Bush administration and the Obama administration come off the official White House website. Every president sets himself up and has an official website. They post images, usually about every week, sometimes every other week. 94 new images just went up last week on the Obama White House website. Those are their official photographer posting the images. That's where I got the ones I just showed you of President Bush, and it's where I got the ones that I'm going to show you at the end of President Bush and the ones of President Obama. But the first person who really understood how you can use art to justify and figure out how you can spread your reign is, do you know who this is? It's Augustus Caesar. It is Octavian, the man who was adopted by his uncle Julius Caesar and succeeded him. And he had a problem because, of course, his uncle, Julius Caesar, had wanted to control by himself the Roman Empire, and it got him assassinated. So if you're going to decide that you're going to take over power, you need to somehow have an image that makes you a household name. You have to seem familiar. And this is, of course, a time before CNN, 24-hour news, before newspapers, before, Newsweek magazine splashing all over the cover. You need to make yourself seem like old hat, something that's accessible. So he put himself on coins. Now, it's not that rulers hadn't put themselves on coins before, but the man who really perfected it is Augustus Caesar. And he has an image that he uses. He puts on the back a series of images. I happen to like this one because it shows victory, which is very important because he had victory over those people who had assassinated his uncle. And he writes across the top SPQR, which is? There's always somebody who knows. The Senate and Populace of Rome. Those people, that it is an image that is really about republicanism. It's about being of the people. And yet he's over here by himself on the other side. So it's very clever. He calms you down. He says, yes, I'm one of you. I'm first citizen. I understand. We are a republic based on people. By the way, I'm all by myself over here. And I have gathered this power together. It's very clever. The other thing he does, and that works so well, is he begins to craft an image in these series of portrait busts. You can see it looks just like the coin. This one's in Boston. If you get down to Boston, it's a classic example. It's a really beautiful one. Because what he did was he sent these busts out to all the different larger towns, and they would erect in the marketplace a long column, and at the top would be the bust of the current emperor. So that when you went about your business, when you're exchanging goods in the marketplace, when you are out there talking to your friends, looking over you is the emperor. What do we do today? Where do we have images of our president? Federal buildings, schools. Every day when I go in to mail post office, yes, they're arcing down all the time. You go to the police to do something, register the car, there's the president. It's the same thing. We do the same thing today. We basically use images and place them around to let us know somebody's watching. Kindly, perhaps, but watching. And Augustus, even though he lived to a ripe old age, the nice thing is when you live in this period, he never aged. Before Botox, he never, ever aged. He looked like this forever. The three little curls of hair, the slightly Roman nose, the big ears slightly sticking out, the pointy chin, the smooth skin. He looked like this to the day he died. This is what he's doing. He's setting up and saying, I'm instantly recognizable. And because I'm recognizable, I am really going to familiarize myself with you. You can understand. You can accept me. But I wanted to show you just the difference between what Augustus does for his portraiture and the generation before in the Republican Rome, what they were doing. What's the difference? Reality. Pardon? She says reality. You say? Yes, in fact, they called it veristic portraiture, realistic portraiture, verism, the truth. What else do you notice is different?
He's fierce.
Isn't he? He is. He's not somebody, he doesn't look friendly. This is not your friendly fellow. What else? He's what?
Old.
Yes, he's old. You know, if Augustus never ages, age is to be prized in the Republican period. So we are all in the wrong age. Yes, it was prized. And part of what you did is that in the earlier period, the strength came from the wisdom that was with age. And you would increase the creases or wrinkles or frowns on the face. You would show that. Augustus changes that. He is very sort of visually conscious of somebody who is going to be a ruler above everyone else, has to be almost superhuman. And he creates this superhuman image that he uses again and again. And the last thing he does is he's really aware of his heritage. He's really interested in how to craft his legacy. Who's crafting the legacy of the Bush administration today? Yes, Dick Cheney. He's out there talking. There is every administration wants to craft their legacy. They do it in different ways. We have Larry King. They had statuary. This is a beautiful statue of Augustus, done and probably done right after he died, or perhaps was being carved as he died. There's kind of a debate in the world right now about that. But it shows him, and because he's barefoot, we know he ended up dead. This is the thing. But it shows on his armor, on what we call his cuirass, carved, it talks about him as a ruler. And it shows, first of all, a common Roman soldier with his little dog, his sort of, knucks down there. And it shows a Parthian, these fierce Germanic tribes. And what happened is, under Augustus, the standard of some of the Roman troops, which had been captured by the Germans, was given back to them because they were able to overcome the German tribes. He brought the honor, which is the standard, back to Rome. So very much the center of his chest, he wants you to remember, I brought honor back. That's a sort of like, The second thing is, he has this woman sort of reclining here holding a cornucopia, which is about what? Plenty, prosperity. I brought prosperity. Now, this is not rocket science, guys. This is just, he wants you to understand it. We have, this woman who is bringing the sun across the top here. So what does he want to say with that? What kind of message do you get from that? It's bright hope in America, morning in America, whatever you want to call it. It is indeed. It's that bringing of the sun, the bringing of the new age that's coming in. And under the sky, this firmament of the sky that's being held up, everything is in this prosperous time. And we could go on. He fills this whole surface with a kind of panegyric about what he was able to do. And he leaves it there for everyone to see and to assure himself that his legacy will be remembered as he wants it to be remembered, which is what you all have to do if you're a ruler. You always have to make sure you have your legacy crafted properly if you're going to be remembered.
Can I ask about the cherub figure?
Yeah, that's a great question. What's this guy doing here? And he's riding a dolphin. I don't know if you can see, the dolphin sort of has like this. And that's because the cherub, in this case, Cupid, and the dolphin are connected to Venus. And Augustus thought that his lineage went back to Venus. Venus was in his family tree. Don't ask. But it made him almost semi-divine, and that was something he also wanted to craft and make part of it. Many people may think it, he knew it. Then what happens, and what I wanted to just talk a little bit about, is that works so well, that kind of panegyric, that kind of putting yourself forward in the Roman period, because in the Roman period, statecraft and religion were one and the same. They really did not, there was no division. When it gets more complicated is when we have the Christian faith, which has its own hierarchy, its own structure. And then this is Justinian, a famous emperor, and this is Maximus, Maximianus, who is the bishop, the most important man in I always get this wrong, the eastern part of Italy at that time. And the two of them are really vying for attention. And here's the problem. To be crowned emperor, you need to have someone who is a religious man. Sometimes it's the Pope, sometimes it's the Patriarch. You need someone who is religious to crown you, which the church then interpreted as saying the emperor is always under the church. Emperors hated that. They wanted to say, no, I choose the bishops, I choose the Pope, and therefore you are subservient to me. And there is always confrontation that happens because of that. This goes on really until about the 12th century when things kind of simmer down, or maybe 14th even, before they really get it right. And I love this because you see, here is Justinian in the center. You can find him. He's got his crown on. He's even got a halo. It's not that he's a saint, but in the East, the thought was that the halo showed that you had radiance. And that's what he has. He's a radiant fellow. And then here is the fellow who is the head of the church, who holds the jeweled cross in his hand and stands there quite firmly. And you can see that they're jockeying for position, because if you look at the top, from the waist up, Justinian overlaps his elbow. But if you look down here, his feet are closer to us. They're sort of, he moves forward. He comes a little closer to us. So they're both of them. The artist is very careful to give them both a kind of playful ability to claim priority. Now the other thing is, the three props for any ruler in the Middle Ages are right there. What are the three props? Who needs to support you? Military. And so here's the military back here. What else? The church. And so here's the church back here. And what's the third one? Not quite. Not the holy watermelon, no. Pardon? I said the people, but not just any people. The nobility, yes. Because other people you can probably control, but these are the nobility. They have a big, this slide makes it look black, but it's a purple stripe, because the purple, you were allowed to wear purple if you were nobility. So you have all three of the props there, showing us who they are, who is supporting you. And you'll find when you look in photographs today, how often you see these people indirectly, slightly, in the background. The same kinds of things are put there.
What is he holding?
Oh, he's the watermelon? He's holding actually a big basket in which bread appears, because he's going to take it up to the altar for the Eucharist. So he's
And where is this?
This is in San Vitale in Ravenna in Italy. Beautiful, it's a beautiful church.
I reacted also that the circle in the background created something of a halo effect. It set him apart from everybody else there.
You mean this back here?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a bullseye. It sort of says, here we are. You know, here I am. And he also gets the best jewelry. He does, there's no doubt. And he sort of shows up. Pardon? So the whole thing, it really sets out who he is and what we are supposed to think about him. And Justinian is really about general acclaim. Here's what's happening. This works well, and it goes on for a while. And it's really the standard way in which in the East, in the Byzantine Empire, that's the way in which they constructed the emperor. In the West, Charlemagne begins to change this a little bit. And here is Charlemagne. Here's Vespasian. So here's a Roman emperor, here's Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne, I think, is a fascinating creature. And part of it is because when he comes on the scene, there's not a lot happening in Western Europe. People, I hate the term Dark Ages. It just makes me like fingernails on the board. But it is absolutely true that there was chaos when he came on the scene. And he must have been an absolutely charismatic leader. In an age of short people, he's over 6 foot tall. He's there with this big booming voice. He has a family. He marries 3 times legitimately. He has 18 children, 13 are legitimate, the rest aren't. But he accepts them all, and he uses them as an extended family that he sends out. Because here's the problem, and the reason there was chaos, is the fact that if you can't pick up the phone, if you can't call people in periodically to let them touch you and see you and talk to you, how do you control all these regions if you keep adding onto your empire? And he solves it with fecundity. He solves it by having these 18 children and sending them out into the empire and then setting them up. So, so one daughter is the abbess of this place. One daughter goes over here. And he conquers huge areas. Sometimes he conquers through diplomacy. Sometimes he conquers through might. Sometimes he conquers through just sheer brutality. I always tell my students that he believed in making people Christian. Not that we think he was such a wonderful, fervent Christian, but he thought if you were united in faith, that was a way to unite all these disparate tribes he was bringing together. So he works really hard at that. In the Saxons, I happen to be a Saxon heritage, and so man, did I hear this story. The Saxons, when he conquers them, he takes his big war sword and he plunks it down in the earth. And every boy had to go past that sword. And if your head went above the sword, he lopped it off. Basically feeling, I assume, that at a certain age, you were not redeemable. You could not be persuaded or changed. But at this point, if you were younger than that, you probably could be brought into the fold. So he's a little brutal, we have to say, but he does reunite an empire. He creates and he puts himself at the top of it. And he's smart enough to look at the past, say, how have the Romans done it? And he does it again. He puts himself in a toga. We got to say that's pretty cute. He puts this laurel wreath in his hair, and he looks like a Roman emperor. He looks to the past to see how to justify the present. And we do that all the time. Today, when people are trying to decide what is the right way in which to take a law or what to do, we say, well, what was done in the past? What did the framers of the Constitution believe? How are we supposed to do it? And this is exactly what he's doing. He's looking back, trying to figure it out. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I just wanted to do a comparison to let you sort of play with it. This is Charlemagne. He is on the horse. This is actually a tabletop piece. It's a bronze that it traveled with him. He was an itinerant ruler. He did not have a capital city. So he would travel around and meet with different people. And he'd plop this on the table. And it's modeled, he tells us, or his biographer tells us. We have 2 biographies of him. And Einhard tells us that it's modeled over this great statue, which is over life size. Many people, so who's seen it already? Seen it in Rome? It's right in the Campidoglio, okay? It was a statue of Marcus Aurelius, but in the Middle Ages they thought it was Constantine, the first Roman emperor, who was Christian. So they didn't melt it down. So they thought it was Constantine, and he uses it as his model. What do you think, what works and what doesn't for you for the Charlemagne?
He has a funny pose, sort of twisted.
Kind of moving back? He kind of thrusts the orb at you. He wants to make sure you see that. That's for sure. Yeah, it does. It seems a little awkward. There's a little bit of awkwardness there. What else? I make my He is. He has almost like this board up his back, kind of, it's rigid.
Well, the horse sort of overshines Charlemagne.
You think?
It's an attractive-looking horse.
But it's kind of a Morgan horse size, don't you think? I mean, maybe we're Vermonters, we don't care. But it's a little bit of a Morgan horse. It's not really like a great steed, a battle horse. Charming, marching out. What else strikes you about this?
He has a weak chin.
Yeah, he does. He really does. It's a problem. He grows the beard. We think, it's like, why do you grow a beard? Everybody has a reason. He didn't have the physiognomy of a leader, but he may do. Clearly, that didn't bother the 3 wives. So he has an orb on this, and then he has the reins gathered in here. This. And so you've got very different sort of, ways of approaching it. In Marcus Aurelius, he probably had an orb in his hand at one point. That's gone now. But he's reaching out. He's, actually probably pushing back the barbarians, which is what he did. But Charlemagne's very contained. He's very sort of rigidly contained. He also, and this is my favorite, he wears his crown, which I got to tell you, on a horse, this is not going to be what you're going to do. But it's very important to have those markings to show him as the emperor. He's all about continuity. He's about getting himself organized in line with the past and getting ready for continuity. And that works pretty well. His son who succeeds him, Louis the Pious does a good job. The problem really comes when you get to the grandkids. And that's often the case. Because with Louis the Pious, it was pretty clear he didn't have children, didn't have anybody to pass it on. It was the grandkids. How were they going to divide up the empire when it came time to the grandkids? And I want to just show you a problem that comes up and people use about when you're not quite sure you deserve power, but you want it. And the person we're going to use, for example, is Charles the Bald. Charles, I always say I always tell my students that the Carolingians, which is the line of Charlemagne that starts with Charles the Great, Charlemagne, and ends up with Louis the Child. It's not a great trajectory that they had, but we're at Charles the Bald right now. So here he is, the grandson. He's in the center. He's on the throne. It's not funny. No. We didn't say he was not a good man. He's sitting there. And what we have is someone who wants to be emperor, but it's been given to his brother, Lothar. And Lothar, as emperor, has the most power. Charles has been given what we would call France today to rule. It's not a bad thing, but he really wants the title emperor. He's only king at this point. And he does a series of books that he gives and he illustrates, and he puts himself in them, and he gives them to very important monasteries. Now, why do that? Why give it to monasteries? Pardon?
Only literate people around.
Okay, there's literate people. They're going to understand. What else? Okay, the people are going to be using those manuscripts. They're going to be seeing them. And monasteries are?
The publishing company.
They are the public. They're the Random House of their day. This is true. And you leave them there because you want to persuade that one of those props of your throne, the religion prop, to be on your side. So he has copies of this, and he does it everywhere. So you see Charles on the throne. Then who are these guys on either side? Counselors, definitely. And they have little diadems on, so they are probably what? Nobles, yes, nobles. Okay, now here's these two guys. Who are they? Military. So just like Justinian, we're seeing the same thing. And this is a guy that we're going to hold off on him for a second. These guys down here, do we know with their little tonsures? They're the church. They're all the church. They're the ones who made the book, this book we're holding and looking at, that's being given to Charles. And look how big he is. He's huge. Scale-wise, he's the biggest. So hierarchy, right away, when you're not that sure about your power, you begin to play with how you're going to look more powerful. He makes himself big. He gives himself the throne. He gets the big spot. And there's one other thing that comes down and shows that he's special. Can you see what that is? The hand up here, that's the hand of God. And the hand of God comes down and blesses Charles as he sits there. It's like adding more and more to this scene. He is going to be singled out. He is the person we want to see in charge. God wants that guy in charge, and it's right there. It kind of ties it all up. And he's sitting there, and I have to tell you this too, he's wearing the crown that his brother is wearing. He's not supposed to have this crown on. This is the crown of the emperor, but he paints it on anyway because he really, really, really wants it. And so it's sort of wishful thinking. And my yes?
We're going to come back to the one
Oh, the one fellow, there's a story, thank you. There's just a story that the fellow who actually commissioned this is this man, the book, who is probably represents every sycophant we ever heard of. And he wants it so bad. He is actually elevated because he gives this book. And he commissions the monks to create it, and then he presents it to Charles the Bald. And he, in a sense, does the wish fulfillment for him, which means you can do it. You can do that. Now, my favorite Charles the Bald one, I have to just show you this, is here's Charles sitting there, actually wearing the correct crown this time, but he's sitting in a very specific place. He's got the hand of God coming down. He's got his supporters on either side. He's got cornucopias. He's a great fellow. But this is an opening in a book, and here's the gutter, and he's looking across the page. And what he's doing, and this is sort of like you have to be in the know, but it's once you figure it out, you go, oh my gosh. He's sitting in Aachen. Now, the reason we know this, in Aachen was where the emperor, when he was crowned, came for his first mass. The first mass was always in Aachen, sometimes called Aix-la-Chapelle. It was where Charlemagne had built a huge palace and had also built a big chapel, the Palatine Chapel, still there. And he sits in the throne of Charlemagne, still there today, hand of God coming down, with the two little lights that are still there on either side. And he looks across the gutter up into a dome, and that's why it's in a circle, because the Palatine Chapel was domed, and the Palatine Chapel was decorated with this scene. So without being the emperor, who's supposed to be the one in that chair and supposed to be the one gazing at that ceiling, he has put himself directly where he wants to be, which is as emperor of this empire rather than king of France. And that's what he does here in this scene. It's about wish fulfillment, general acclaim. And it's a little bit about artist persuasion. If people see this, they're going to understand that when his brother dies, maybe he should take over. And it's certainly about ambition, because art really talks about ambition. Oh, here, I'll show you. There's the Charlemagne's throne. There's the lights up here that show up. And here's the dome, which is a little blitzed out by light, but you can sort of get the feeling. It's the same thing they've captured. Now, then there comes a question, and I was looking and thought, well, okay, so there's art where you are having to justify yourself. There's art where you have to use God to justify yourself. And then there's art where you are God. and how does that work? And that happens really in the Ottonian period. Nobody knows the Ottonians. They're the poor boys of history. But after the Carolingians died out, the Ottonians rose up about 950 to about 1050. They were the guys in charge. And we call them Ottonians because after the first Henry and the last Henry, there was nothing but Ottos through the whole thing. So we're not really inventive as historians sometimes. But if you compare what the Ottonians are doing to what the Carolingians did, the Ottonians need to be elected to office. Things have changed. You don't just pass it down and inherit it. You have to be elected to this office. And so they begin to talk about themselves in their art as being more than just God's blessed, but being God's representative. It's a little change. So if you look at these two, what's changed between Charles the Bald and Otto II, who's sitting here?
Otto's elevated considerably.
Absolutely, he's way up there. He's way up in the sky. And what else? Yes, the hand of God doesn't just bless him or wave from above. The hand of God comes down and puts the crown right on his head, touches him.
And the animals are not in the...
That's right. In fact, these animals, in fact, you know what they are?
The four gospel writers.
That's right. They're if you know the Revelations from the Revelation, there's these image of these four-winged animals, and it came to represent the four writers of the gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So they hold up this wonderful sort of sheet that goes across him. Now, what's that about?
Well, he's also in cross form.
Isn't he? How often do we sit like that? So he's definitely playing himself up as a Christ-like figure. And this wonderful band, where does it go? Where does it cross him? His heart. Absolutely. It's right. I'm sorry, we just killed this. Right across his heart. Right. What you see is it has this ability to show that his heart is there in the religion. His head's in heaven, you know? His body's down here. His body's with all these, the nobles and the clerics and the soldiers, the clerics and the nobles, the guys we expect. But he's up there, and he is Christ-like in the way he's sitting. And that happens when you suddenly have to justify yourself as blessed, as somehow, excuse me? You know what this is?
Yeah, is that a person holding up the throne there?
It's like an allegorical person who's like the image of earth pushing up the throne. So here he is, the blessed man, the Christ-like figure. His wife, by the way, was a Byzantine princess and may have brought some of these ideas with her. She's also the person, Theophanu, who introduced the fork to Western civilization. And we have this wonderful quote where somebody in court is writing and says, she brought with her a pronged instrument which she used to transport meat to her mouth. And we assume that it's a fork. So we like Theophano. She did.
Are we saying the white, the shroud, or whatever that is?
This is probably, what it's supposed to be is probably a scroll unrolling, the holy word that impresses it on his heart, held up by these images.
Over there, it looks more like
This is just a kind of like a camping, sort of like a, but they've taken it, and because it unrolls sort of in scroll-like fashion, it's usually interpreted as that.
So they're different things now.
Yeah, they are.
Because, I mean, functionally, they seem the same, but where they are.
But because one of them creates this sense of almost being a space apart, or a blessed space, and the other is like transporting him up. But yeah, I mean, and people can debate that, and it can be played with, but it's definitely gives him another realm that he's going to. The other thing that happens that I just wanted to mention is that there also becomes, about this time, a bifurcation where there is a private way in which you view yourself and a public way. And Otto III, who is the last guy we just saw, his son, is raised by 3 clerics and is taught the importance of humility. And in this little prayer book, here's Otto groveling on the ground, and across the gutter we see the image of Christ being lifted up, clearly being shown as about humility, being in the dirt, whatever. That's that private, and this is a little tiny, small prayer book that was given to him. Otto was 3 years old when he ascended to the throne, and he was raised by these clerics. We think he was about 12 or 14 when he got this prayer book, and it really is teaching him about how to behave privately. But when he is public, this is what happens, and this is the public image of him that is done. And so what is his public image? I mean, what would you say about this man?
He's bigger, he's bolder, he's more powerful.
He's big. I mean, look, he's huge. Look, if he stood up, he'd push right through the image. He's broad. He's able to be, like you say, powerful. What else strikes you about him? His face is what?
Young.
Yes, he is, and he has that sense, just like Augustus, of being this purity that shines out. Anything else strike you guys?
He's wearing the fanciest clothes, and I also like the faces on the pillars.
Yeah, I know, everybody likes it. My students always say, what are those doing? I don't know, I really don't. But he does, he has this beautiful jeweled work, and his mother, who's the woman who brought the fork, she loved all that kind of Byzantine glitz and brought a lot of jewelry with her too, and you sort of see that come out in the sun. So you have this, holding the orb with Christ, I uphold the Christian world. He sits there when he looks out at you, he challenges you, he takes you on. It's very different what you do publicly from what you do privately. And that, when you begin to see 2 roles in your life, and you begin to play with those 2 roles, that's a new time, that's a different thing that begins to be introduced. I'm going to take a big jump forward, because the thing that I think is fascinating about Napoleon is that his justification for rule is not clear. He's always a little uneasy about what he's doing. very much like Augustus in that way, and it's not surprising that he turns to the Roman Empire and to Augustan art looking for inspiration. So Napoleon, when he is out there, has all these roles he needs to fill. And he's always trying to show competence, whatever he does, however he depicts himself. He's the competent ruler. So in this one, which I just love, is when he's taking the troops over the Alps, and you can see the people who've done it before. And there's Bonaparte, and there's Hannibal, and there's Carolus Magnus or Charlemagne down there. These are the people who've done it. And this is the ruler. And if you look at this, I think, nobody doubts. Here's in the background, here's his soldiers struggling to pull or push the cannon up the mountain. But he himself is sitting there with this wild horse and this flashing wind, and yet completely impervious to it and directional about where he's going. All the lines push that way. Everything tells you it's going to be upward. He's about competence. He's a ruler who is competent. And he does this, and he does 5 versions of this. He sends them to everybody because it is such an important image about who he is. And the other thing he does then is once he gets in power, full power, he has this image done that he has out as the bureaucrat. And I love this because the sword is put aside. He's wearing actually still the suit of the soldier, but he's not being a soldier. He's decorated, he's home from the field, and he has got papers piled up all through here, and the candles are burning low because he's been working late. And this is the image. If you look at the clock, it's almost 1:30 in the morning, and this is the man who's the bureaucrat. And when I look at this, do you remember every president who gets in that I can remember? There's always an article that comes out soon after they take office. Everyone, in like a Newsweek or a Time, that says, Mr. So-and-so gets up at 5 in the morning, is in the office by 6 o'clock, doesn't, and I'm always thinking, my God, can it be that important? I personally would not be there at 5 o'clock up there. But this is the kind of image that we expect of our rulers, and Napoleon really brings that along. He sets that up. He's the working ruler. Now you have to think about this. Before this time, we didn't see rulers work. Rulers worked privately. They kept it hidden. Ruling was to be a figurehead, to show and sort of who you are, to represent something. But he shows you the sweat of it, the hard work that is involved in it. And that changes fundamentally how we begin to look at rulers and what we expect of rulers. So it's all about competence.
You think that's because he was not of royal blood?
He was not of royal blood. He did not come from a tradition of rulers. He also knew that he had to justify why he was ruling. And he justifies it by leadership, vision, and hard work. It's like he could have had slogans. He could have had a PR man doing this. But what's so interesting is he does it so well that after his death, the myth that comes up and the mythic afterlife of Napoleon gives him everything that traditional rulers had. What does he look like when you see him there? Yeah?
I just want to ask a question.
Sure.
Did the hidden hand mean
People talk about it and biographers talk about it, and we don't think so. We think it became a habit, and therefore and as soon as he became aware of it, people who are smart take a habit and make it an affect so that it becomes a sort of symbol of them. But there's nothing like it was crippled or was that, no. Whereas, Kaiser Wilhelm, he had a crippled hand. He's always hiding it, putting it in a pocket or whatever, but not Napoleon.
And again, the back of that chair or whatever is this sort of halo.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he's dead when they do this. This is the mythic afterlife, and he looks like God. He looks like Zeus sitting there, It's all the things that gather in and make you into something that is almost unattainable as a leader, gathered in this spot. And he looks a lot, I really think, like Otto, like that public Otto, who sits there with his jewels on and his orb in his hand. We do the same thing all the time. I mean, I hate to say this, but we really do.
It's interesting too that coming on the heels of the revolution and the rights of man and so on, he doesn't have any religious garb.
Yes.
and but he doesn't need the church.
He's an Enlightenment guy. Yeah, he's after the Enlightenment. It's not about the religion. It's really about the ruling.
So he's gone laurels, he hasn't gone crown.
Yes, and he has the big eagle down below. If you see it in the carpet, he's really about sort of becoming Roman. And the other interesting problem is what we did when we became a republic. Because when we broke away from England, when we had to create a visual vocabulary that was not going to be predicated upon what our tradition had been, we had to think up what we wanted to say in things like the portraiture of our leaders. And so, you have Washington standing there and in a very sort of regal pose, but dressed all in black, very calm, holds the sword, protecting the nation, gestures to the table where there's work to be done. He is definitely somebody who is kept and contained a bit more. But there's one little spot where they kind of went into hyperbole, which I just love, because if you can see it back here, there's a little rainbow in the sky. There's a little like morning in America. And I'll show you what they were working against, the type, is when you see what, there seems to be yellow lines through this. We're going to ignore that for a moment. When you look at, this is the French king, not the English, but if you look at this is the type that was the standard, and this is the type that they turned it into. What have they changed? What do you see that's changing it?
George doesn't have such good legs.
George's legs are a little hidden, yeah, George. And he doesn't get these great red heels. I love the...
Louis loved his legs.
Yes, he did.
Louis always wanted his legs on the shirt.
And in fact, he had different cuts for his suits, so he would walk around so you could see his legs, yes. Yeah?
Washington's hand is open, like he's more open to the people, to ruling the people, to hearing the people's opinions, while Louis is holding that, whatever it is there, right? Like
The scepter.
More involved in himself and more involved in his rule than he is to the opinions of the people.
So he's definitely, it's a closed person as opposed to the open welcoming that you've got over here. I don't think we want to go that far. But Louis flourishes himself. He displays himself.
But he's not about getting a good day's work done.
No.
I mean, he's neither a soldier nor is he
No, and he has...
sit down and, do the deed.
Absolutely, and he has a sword, but his is really a ceremonial sword, as opposed to this working thing that we've got going over here. The other thing, but you can see that there's a tradition. You can see they both have pillars in the background. Yes, and the drapery that helps give them that kind of, that doesn't take them out of a specific time and place, makes it sort of into a place that is universal, if you want to think of it that way. So
Look at the difference in the pillars. One is porphyry and gold, the other is painted wood, presumably.
absolutely, you've got the sort of the gold and as you say, the marble, porphyry, whatever, and you've got the sort of simple sandstone, maybe limestone, whatever, but something that's very simple for its day, unadorned. That's the thing.
But nice choice of furnishing.
Yes, he does. He has a lovely sort of
Be upholstered
back in the background
on both.
on both of them. Yes. Well, the other one is fleur de lis, which is what you'd need.
It's curious that the drapery on the table is pulled up.
It's
It's just the way Louis.
Pulled up for his leg.
The table leg and Louis' leg.
But you need to pull it up because what you've got down here are all the books and the law. So you need to be able to see that it's not just decorative, it's work down there.
George also seems to be directing attention away from himself with his hand, and the same with the color seems to be focusing our attention away from him, whereas with Louis it's more focused on him.
Absolutely. George, it's really, he's black and white. He sort of fades a little bit because he's not the important thing. The continuity of office, the governing is the important thing. And as you're right, the red pools here. There's red back here with the seal of the president back. You can sort of blurry back here. Whereas Louis is on display. Mm-hmm.
Well, George does not look like the military figure that he built his reputation on.
Right. It is this other
It's
side.
kind of small and insignificant there.
And he doesn't have that sort of broad, sort of, with the kind of epaulette things.
And Louis, he looks down on me. He's really up there.
Absolutely. Louis, our relationship to Louis is down lower. Our relationship to George is much more on his level.
Well, I find it interesting that the Washington furniture is gilt and that it looks like a throne.
I think that's true, except it's got this nice little, crest of the United States. It doesn't belong to him, it belongs to the nation.
Yeah, so it has just, the office has just as much authority.
That's right. And in fact, it's almost more visible than you can see in Louis's actual throne, which is sort of pushed back.
Well, this is sort of along the lines of what some other people said, but having seen a few Byzantine icons in my day, it's almost as though George is doing the old, blessing gesture of blessing that Jesus does in the icon. I doubt that
That's
really is
interesting.
borrowing, if you will, but still, it's addressing the viewer rather than calling the attention of the viewer to himself.
I don't think he's really making a blessing gesture. I think what it does mean is as soon as you use your hand, it carries your attention out. And I always say this when I talk to my students that, if you're doing public address and and you're nervous, use your hands and pull the attention away. Push it over there because people will follow your gesture. It doesn't stay with you then. And the same thing happens with him, is that, we see George, we see his head, he's that white hair against the dark, we can't help but find him. But we follow it out, and we follow it out to the work of ruling, of keeping a country going, is basically what we're doing.
And it's an echo of Augustus Prima Porta.
Yes.
To go out.
Absolutely, to say, I am addressing you, I am talking to you.
It's a secular blessing.
It is a secular blessing, it is. I like that, that's good. Now, when we do George and we do this, there's different ways in which you can do him. And here, for the person who wanted him as a ruler, who is a military ruler, there is something like, there's Porthole George. That's what it's called. I don't make it up. It's called Porthole George. And actually, that's in the White House right now. It's in the Oval Office. It has been for the last 3 presidents. And that has this sort of more, I think, it's more like Napoleon on horseback. It has that leadership with a vision kind of thing to it, as opposed to the office of the man as president. But just as there was a problem with what to do with Napoleon after his death, there's a problem with what to do with Washington. Oh, there it is. I was showing. I'm sorry. I didn't know I put that in, but you can see it up there over the fireplace. There's a problem what to do with George after his death, and they made some mistakes. And this is one that was considered not to be successful. It is now in the basement of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. You have to really ask for it. But it is, we don't like our rulers naked. We don't. And it is a wonderful statue that Greenough, who was a fabulous sculptor, wanted to do of George as the great God George who was going to lead. And it didn't work because our republic is not set out to have our leaders be gods.
Actually, that's a very Republican George. That's the early toga that was skimpier than the late one.
And he doesn't have the tunic on underneath. Maybe if he had the tunic on, we'd be a little better about it. But there's always these problems, which gets me back to where I wanted to sort of leave you with tonight. We have just a few more things I wanted to say. One is, it's not just what you have in the images, but it's also the space in which you inhabit that begins to tell you something about the man. And so, here, I can show you, obviously, this is the first President Bush. This is his office. This is the young Colin Powell. I like that. Sununu, who's now making problems for us over in New Hampshire. This is an office that says a lot about the man. And what I do, I always do this, and drives my husband crazy, is all those meetings or those addresses to the nation when they used to sit at their desk, I'm always looking behind going, oh, do you think that's, what has he got on his desk? Who is that back there? What has he chosen to put around him? Because it really says something. They're allowed to decorate the Oval Office to their taste. And what you see when you look around you is something about the man. And I think it's fascinating. So, George Herbert Walker Bush, he had this very pacific, calming blue all through his office. He had scenes of the sea. He had people here, sort of models of ships. He had a way in which he went to see this. Who's that? What president? Okay, what president would have Franklin? A ship model?
Jimmy Carter.
Yes, very good. Jimmy Carter, okay? Who's that? Andrew Jackson, eagles, whole collection of eagles.
Is it LBJ?
No, not LBJ. Reagan, sunny man. LBJ's was much darker. This is a very bright, sunny California room. You can see a lot about this. We got the Indian symbol. Clinton. How'd you know?
I see Roosevelt. I remember he was there. I see Lincoln in the back, I believe.
Roosevelt, Lincoln, Winston Churchill, Rodin's Thinker, my favorite. And this great painting, and Kennedy over here, and this great painting. Can you see what that is? It's still in the Oval Office today. It's the arm of the Statue of Liberty. It's just her arm. It's just a fabulous painting. Very, very vibrant. And that's just another one of Clinton. So we're back to, now that you know sort of what to look for, I thought I'd run you through a few more of Bush, let you sort of decode them, what they're saying, and then I'd show you the Obama ones. So what is this telling us? Military. How does he?
One of the troops.
And look at this. The color that they gave for his suit matches completely.
This guy sitting next to him was
Yes, it's very nice, isn't it? It makes him a little easier to see, keep the shorter guy down here, makes him look a little taller. It's very clever, very clever. This is my favorite. This I have to say. I don't think we need to decode this too much. But this, I have to say, is one of, and this comes from the official White House site. They put it up. They loved it.
Where is it? Do you know?
It's in Oklahoma. Oh, well. But yes, and it is, it is just about, God's on my side. And of course, what does every president say at the end of a speech? God bless America. There it is. I love this one. These two didn't get the memo. The two who are not quite the same as everybody else.
in more ways than one.
In more ways than one, absolutely. Or maybe they did and said, no, thank you. I know, that's right. And it's just, I love that. That is one of those ways in which, the 1,000 flags, the 1,000 people, it all focuses down. And this I just love. They really did it. And this is the seal of the President of the United States of America in back of him. Just like Napoleon, just like Justinian, it's there. It's all there. We do the same stuff. Yes. Now, the interesting thing is when Obama went in, of course, this whole group who had devised these shots went out with Bush. And Obama pulled in Pete Souza, who's a really well-known photographer. And do you know who Souza had been the official photographer for? Which other president?
Was it Clinton?
No. Reagan, which is fascinating. So I'm going to show you what the new image that you have on the White House website, and you really should go on this periodically. First of all, we've got Lincoln now. Slowly, he hasn't quite decorated 100%. He's just beginning to move things in. And there's, for example, a bust of, who was it who just went out? And a Martin Luther King bust just came in back over here. I saw just last week. So I was like, oh, interesting. So I'm going to run through these, and I just want you to think about it. At the end, I'm going to ask you, what's the image they're trying to put together? There's this, which I think that's a brilliant shot. I think that's just brilliant. Is that? And there's that where he's not even in it, it's just his arm. Something you would never have seen with Bush.
Even his eyes closed.
And that, which I just love. That's the. I love that with the Lincoln up above. I just think it's great. It's looking in a mirror. So what's the image they're trying to build with the Obama presidency?
Working hard.
Working, absolutely.
One of the guys, one of the people.
One of the people.
Ability to command attention with the hands.
Mm-hmm. You know, that sense of reaching out.
Yeah.
Charismatic,
Yes.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Doesn't this? It's a little Dan Bray. Oh God.
Probably half a dozen of them.
A little Dan Brownish. But this, I think that this is a very different image that they're putting together now in the White House. And there are now, right now, over 500 images that are posted on the White House website that are just great to go through to see the image they're building, that Pete Souza's building for him. And it's very similar to Reagan's image, working, riding horses, vigorous, you know, all those things that we saw Reagan do, off the cuff, unposed, not carefully crafted. And clearly it's an image that Obama wanted, that same kind of thing. The image. Not that he did it, just that this is the image. We're not talking reality, we're talking image. So, you know, I think that that's something to think about. And I also want you to go away from tonight a little more visually aware, thinking a little bit more about what's being fed to you and what it's saying. Yeah?
So this is from their website?
This is from the official.
What's the thing about the glasses and
I think what it is, I think it's a breakfast. I think they're all lining up, and these are the juice glasses, and they're up on a buffet, and this is the mirror behind the buffet. And Sousa's standing here taking this image of them sort of being mirrored in there. But what's fabulous is this sort of Lincoln, and there's a new one that's just up where there's Colin Powell meeting with Obama. And I wanted to put it on, I forgot to. And in between, there's Lincoln's portrait up above, and there's a portrait of Martin Luther King between them. Stunning. It is so stunning.
Doesn't this look a little bit like the images that JFK had, though?
A little bit, but
Active, thoughtful, engaged.
his tended to be black and white, yeah, but it was the same thing. You saw him working in the office. Absolutely. Saw somebody over here, yeah?
Well, I'm starting to get interested in this campaign, and I started looking at it actually who the they is that creates these things.
Mm-hmm.
And are you aware of who actually is manipulating this? I mean, it's not, he's not thinking about this himself.
No.
I'm thinking, for example, at Mile High, he had Britney Spears' stage manager create that. And so those guys that are creating it come from another world, an entertainment world, no longer as they did during, say, during the Kennedy administration.
Absolutely.
Came from the advertising business.
And I think
Who are they hiring?
what they haven't, I would say this, from what we can tell, and I don't troll the site every week, but from what I can tell is that they have somebody who's a TV person who actually came from the NBC News program. And that person is in charge of creating the staging. And then they have someone else, and who comes from more entertainment, and I don't know I don't know his profile at all, but that's somebody, and I don't know who the underlings are. But yeah, they are the ones who go out, and Bush had a very similar sort of, a setup. They had, for example, the idea that you could do backdrop sheets with tiny little writing that nobody in the audience could see, but when the camera was on it, it could be read. So those are the ways in which you can get your message out, even if you don't get it in that venue. So I think, we have to be aware. We're in a media-driven world, and people have to be aware if they're stupid, if they're not. This is a certain point. I saw that there was.
Well, I get the impression from not just this picture, but this one specifically, that they're in the background. They're like, worker ants, and you're not supposed to really pay attention to them. You're just supposed to be reassured that they're all there doing, taking care of all the business.
That there is more, that there are a lot of them working on it. And I think it's sort of interesting that Obama's not in the center of the composition. He's kind of shoved out. I mean, Lincoln, but he's shoved off to the side a bit, which gives you the sense, I think, that you're getting of like in this long line happening. Absolutely, yeah?
It seems like each of these guys, each of these presidents has his own brand.
Mm-hmm.
And their artistic projection, if you will, has to match that brand. You can't use somebody else's strategy because it conflicts with your own image. And Reagan, of course, was this avuncular figure that you knew you could sort of mess around with behind his back, but basically he had your interest at heart. And we like this idea of him being removed and, as we mentioned, having pictures of him riding his horses and all. And that's been a certain image of the recreation of the nobility. Whereas Obama, of course, has this issue of being a black man, and just we weren't used to that image. And I wasn't following it carefully, but during the campaign, supposedly he had these famous columns for one of the
That was the
speeches.
Denver, yeah.
Supposedly had his own fake, presidential seal. But I mean, his handlers really had to get people used to seeing him in that role. And you don't want to see him working out of the gym or playing basketball because again, he's a black guy, right? I mean, you need to see him working.
Although on the White House website, he's playing basketball. He is. There's so wonderful.
Population, it's black, right? But I mean, at least in terms of what you're projecting here,
Yeah.
it's important that he be working and not goofing off.
That's right. And you see a lot of that. You see more than you ever did with Bush family images, not the children, but with Michelle. There was not in the Bush administration. Laura Bush hardly ever appeared. Some Christmas pictures, some things. She was hardly a presence on that, and Michelle is much more a presence. Michelle Obama on the current White House website. Again, a different kind of image working with. But I think the idea that he used columns in Denver. If you look at that picture of George Washington with the columns behind, columns create this sense of somehow tradition being carried on, and it was very smart. I know people ridiculed him for it, but I thought, man, it is a tradition that people use to show authority, and you need to as a black man when you haven't had a black president before.
But I was just going to say, I think that the medium is the message, and we're in a visual culture, and I think in very many ways, the idea, it's almost, if too many people are aware that this is what all this symbolism is, it's almost like subliminal. You've got to stick it in so that people aren't really paying attention, like in the way that the
Right.
Roman emperors, even though they, for a long time there, they weren't actually related to one another, but they did things to make it
Look.
as though they were.
Absolutely.
And nowadays, what am I talking about? Queen Elizabeth has been on the throne since 1952. She's changed. She's not the 27-year-old who came to the throne, and
Right.
Victoria wasn't.
Yes.
They didn't change her every year, but they changed her at least 3 times, because nowadays you couldn't have a
You
27-year-old.
you couldn't be like Augustus, still use it looking at 53, looking at like you're 25, yeah.
Images can backfire. I was just thinking of the mission accomplished.
Yes.
And the disaster that was. His handlers arranged that.
Yes, they
right?
did.
And we say, what a good job they did with Rushmore, but look at the idiocy of putting him on that
Yes. The-
aircraft carrier with that slogan.
And do you know, they took, after it became clear, you cannot find that image. There was an official White House image that was on the White House website of the mission accomplished, and they took that down when it became clear that that things were not going well. And I'm so mad at myself that I didn't take it off the White House website then, because now all the ones that you can find on the web, on different websites or whatever, are kind of grainy and pixelated, and so it's. Yeah, they knew they'd made a boo-boo. Yeah.
Well, that's why I asked how people they is, because during the Bush administration, what I'm following is that he didn't control or tailor. He was like trying to remember all those pictures of him down in Texas cutting brush.
Yes.
I mean, it was so obvious that he was wearing wingtips. Really just didn't work. And Obama was much more careful about managing his own image so that it matches his personality, not as
It's a little less, it seems, and this is, I think, the brilliance of Obama. Who knows what the reality is, but it appears more natural. It seems less staged. Yes, that's the.
even this photo, it shows everyone else
You know, he commands, and that's like the arm sticking out. It's like this commanding presence. Yeah.
You know, we haven't seen here in College Road Street, but advertisements for local politicians always show them listening
Yes,
to the people. We're obviously it's a different story.
that's right. But yeah, because we expect the people who are going to represent us to listen to us, as opposed to tell us what's going to happen. Yeah, I think it's right. Well, thank you so much. It was lovely. It was lovely to come here.